welcome to the Fulcrum Democracy Forum Meet the Change Leaders program, made possible by our dear friends at CityBiz. It's all about celebrating the work of America's most innovative and inspiring leaders who are working to change our toxic politics. We always do two things in these interviews. We learn about what these leaders are doing and why it matters, but we also make sure to identify ways that all Americans can get involved in supporting their efforts in 2024 and beyond. So today, the leader we've got is Nick Troiano, who is the executive director of Unite America. I actually founded Citizen Connect, and we've got hundreds of amazing nonpartisan organizations on that platform. But I can't think of a better person or a better organization to be highlighting today, because they're really laser focused on election reforms that have real game changer potential. They also have an incredible track record of 50 accomplishments already across the country. I could spend, by the way, regarding Nick, the entire time of this interview talking about what he's accomplished in his career so far. Among other things, he was identified as a Forbes 30 under 30, which is a very, very big deal. But I want to really keep the focus on what he's doing right now with his team and Unite America. So without any further ado, I want to just jump into the questions. So first of all, Nick, what's the most important thing you want all Americans to know about your organization and the role it's playing in helping address polarization and toxic politics? This is sort of the elevator pitch question.
Thanks for having me, Brian. It's a pleasure to be here. As you know, I have a book coming out at the end of February called The Primary Solution. And so the most important thing I would like Americans to know is first that the biggest solvable problem in our politics today is the role that party primaries are playing in disenfranchising millions of voters, distorting representation, and fueling so much political division. And second, that, as I mentioned, it's entirely solvable. The Constitution gives every state the ability to set the time, place, and manner of their elections. And as we've already seen in many states around the country, citizens are rising up through lobbying their legislatures or running ballot initiatives to fix this problem. United America is proud to play a supportive role in this, but we're not looking to be the household brand. We just want people to know that party primaries are the primary problem in our politics and what they can do to solve it.
Thank you, Nick, so much. And I do want to emphasize this new book coming out, which is very, very exciting. And it is, again, it's the 27th of this month. Okay, great. Look, elevator pitch is not enough for what you folks do and the breadth and scope of what you are leaning into across the country. So the second question is, take a step back with us for our CityBiz listeners, and give us a sense of sort of how you see Unite America in this broader effort, which is not something that's going to be a one-year thing or a two-year thing. So give us a sense of your vision of the arc of your work and the impact it's going to have across the country.
When we relaunched Unite America in 2019 as a philanthropic venture fund focused on accelerating and scaling nonpartisan election reform, our perspective was that there is a strong movement afoot that already had some accomplishments under its belt, but that we dramatically need to scale this movement if we hope to bring solutions to bear in enough time to make a big enough difference on the threats facing our democracy today. So we really see our role as playing a catalyzing and accelerating role, primarily through mobilizing financial resources to state campaigns and national organizations working on this issue, but also complementing our financial investments with a lot of hands-on guidance and support and coordinating of what is a very much growing movement. We were just discussing that the National Association of Nonpartisan Reformers were in town here in Denver. That group was twice as large as it was just a few years ago. And I think that's because more people are seeing just what a dire state our democracy is in right now and peeling back the layers of the onion to figure out what they can do at a systemic level to make a difference. And as more and more people come to the realization that the big problem in our politics is not just who we elect, but how we elect, they're getting more and more involved in election reform, and that's where our organization comes into play to support them in their efforts to make a difference.
I mean, that makes so much sense. I'm a big Archimedes fan, and you need to have the lever, the fulcrum, and the place to stand. And I think your organization is supporting that place to stand, and not just for your organization, but for a bunch of grassroots and state and national efforts, and with the track record behind it. So my next question is, maybe you could highlight something that you're particularly proud of that's happened in the last year or so. And I know there's a bunch of states, including Alaska and Virginia, you could talk about, but I'd look to you to highlight something that has really shown your model and the community that you're building coming together and making a big difference.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I would like to talk about Alaska because it is both a long-standing and a real-time state that we're engaged in as a true model of what election reform can do. So in 2019, when we launched our fund, Alaska was actually the first state campaign that we invested in to help it qualify for the ballot. The reformers there were pursuing an initiative that did two things. It replaced the traditional party primaries with a nonpartisan all-candidate primary, where the top four finishers would go to the general election. And in the general election, voters would have the option of ranking their candidates to ensure a majority winner. And what this reform did the first time it was used in 2022 was ensure that every candidate running for office actually had to campaign and win support from a majority of voters. So that even if you're in a solidly red or blue district, you can't just rely on the small faction of your party base to get elected and to stay in office. This gave every voter a meaningful ballot, and it also provides the incentives for leaders in Alaska to be willing and liberated to work across the aisle to solve problems because they no longer face the threat of getting primaried out of office. So we were fortunate to be able to play a role in mobilizing resources to support that state campaign, help implement the reform, and now in a third phase, help defend it because the folks that used to be in power that no longer are, if they weren't supported by a majority of voters, are trying to take this system away from Alaskans. And we're committed to the long term to showing how the Alaska model is a pathway out of the polarization and dysfunction that exists in so many states that levels up to what we see in Congress.
Yeah, thank you. I like a lot of Americans who don't live in Alaska, we've got some awareness of what's going on there. And thank you for giving us more. And like anything, you got to defend the progress you made. I live in New England, and in Maine, ranked choice voting was voted in by by citizens, and yet they tried to derail it multiple times. And so it takes a lot of tenacity. And that's why it's great to have you and your team on this. I think you foreshadowed a little bit my next question, which is, what are you really excited about taking on and leaning into over the next year or so?
Well, this year in 2024 will be the most robust year for election reform that I believe our country's seen really since the progressive era over 100 years ago. Right now, there's something like a half dozen states that either have reform on the ballot or are pursuing it. And that has the potential to liberate a dozen more of our U.S. senators and dozens of representatives and enfranchise millions of voters, especially independent voters that are locked out of closed primary elections in many states around the country. So I think this is going to be a very big year for this issue set, and many more people are going to be learning about the opportunity that we have to make a difference, not just in those states, because importantly, as every state succeeds in reforming their elections, it impacts our federal Congress, because those are the incentives at the state level that those members are beholden to. And over time, I think that will hopefully expand our capacity to solve some of the major challenges facing the country. So this is a long game inherently, but not so long that we were not going to be able to see the change in 5-10 years in that window as more states pursue this and as new folks get elected under these systems.
Nick, thank you so much. I do want to ask you one personal question. Um, you obviously are leaning so deeply into the civic renewal space, And it's one of the most complex and often frustrating challenges on the planet. And you're somebody who had a lot of and has a lot of career options that might be less stressful. So what is it that brought you to basically leaning into one of the great challenges and undoubtedly taking heat for doing it?
I would say with that stress comes a lot of satisfaction, knowing that of the difference that we're able to make as this movement gains steam and succeeds. As you referenced before, I think we have incredible leverage to make a difference. Uh, you know, our country is about to spend over $14 billion likely this election cycle, mostly on 30-second television ads telling one half of the country why the other is bad or evil. For a fraction of that amount that we're able to raise and mobilize, we are in perpetuity changing how leaders can run for office and how they can serve in a way that's much more consistent with what we hope from the people that we elect. And so that just brings me tremendous satisfaction in playing a small role to helping those that are working on the ground and on the front lines in states across the country to make these changes. And it's something that I was inspired to do really since my first internship in college over a decade ago, when I saw a lot of the dysfunction in DC up front as an intern and working on policy in Washington. And then quickly came to realize, wow, there's a whole movement of people that are actually working on this issue at a much more systemic level. And that became my calling.
Well, Nick, we're all blessed for you to have this calling, and we know that every day it can't be, a bed of roses. And so, thank you for leaning in. And that leads to my next question, which is, I think a lot of citizens right now and City Biz listeners right now um, have some trepidation about leaning into the political process. It can feel like trying to, hug a porcupine for, no matter how much they love their country. I'm wondering if you can highlight some ways that people that are inspired by what they've heard from you today can lean in through your work and through your network.
Yeah, I'd say the cause of democracy renewal is much broader than any one particular strategy or tactic. I think election reform is one of the more powerful and practical ways we can make a difference, but it's not the only one. So there are people working on civics education, bridge building, other kinds of election reforms, trying to recruit, country over party type leaders to run for office. So Citizen Connect, I think, is a wonderful resource because people can see the breadth of what the democracy renewal movement really looks like. For those that are particularly interested in election reform, there's groups like Represent Us and our partners at Fair Vote or Open Primaries that folks that are looking to get more involved locally can go to find those opportunities. And the great thing about this movement is that we don't have to rely on a constitutional amendment or act of Congress to see these reforms succeed. So that means wherever you live, there's something that you can do in your state, to improve your election system. And those organizations I mentioned are great groups to help connect you.
Nick, thank you so much, and thank you for also getting a plug-in for Citizen Connect, and it is a great resource for people. We've got over, as I mentioned earlier, over 600 amazing nonpartisan organizations working to help enrich the civic process in the United States. What can people do though? You gave shout outs to other organizations, which I know and are great. What can people do to lean in to support Unite America right now and the mission that you have?
Those organizations I mentioned are supporting our mission and are great conduits for folks looking to get involved at a grassroots level. For those who are more philanthropic, that's the community that Unite America serves, who are looking to put capital to work for this movement. And so people who can do that even on a small dollar basis on our website. We have a monthly sort of membership, as well as people who run foundations or people who are making larger philanthropic contributions. We're focused on the resourcing end of things because it does take money to win and sustain and to create awareness. And we think a dollar invested in election reform is maybe the highest ROI dollar one can invest if you're looking to get upstream from many of the causes that you care about. So we have people come to us all the time who've been active philanthropically on immigration or on climate change or issues of economic disparity. And say, in order to solve these policy problems, we have to solve our political problem because we don't have leaders that are willing to work with each other or pursue evidence-based policy. And so, going even upstream from supporting or opposing particular candidates, they find their way attracted to election reform because that creates the conditions in which we can have a government that's capable of solving those problems.
Thank you, Nick. You had mentioned earlier how much money is going to go into this election cycle, and of course we celebrate. Americans have to make choices about what they invest in, and if they're candidates that you're excited about, right, left, or center, lean into that, and that's great. But I do think, as each of us look at our share of wallet for what we invest in the political industrial complex, we ought to think about taking a portion of it, and whether it's a tithe, 10% or more, and have it go to organizations like Unite America that have a different model and are getting at the structural things, that no matter how much you love your particular candidate, he or she's going to end up in a Washington or a state house, that basically makes it so hard to get things done and to reach across the aisle. And so I'd encourage all of our viewers to think about those kind of opportunities. Nick?
Yeah, I was saying, if you ask me, for example, would you rather replace all 535 members of Congress, or would you rather win these reforms in a half dozen states? I truly do believe the latter will have more impact on seeing better outcomes from our governing institutions because, as you said, we can keep electing new people, but if they're trapped in a system in which they cannot keep their job if they do their job, then it's all for naught.
And it's unfortunately we see those dynamics playing out on almost a daily basis. And Nick, I agree with you 100%. I mentioned Archimedes earlier, and I do think you are leaning into Archimedes kind of move the world opportunities. And I invite everyone in the City Biz viewing audience to look into Nick and Unite America's work closely. His link and his background is part of this the City Biz posting for this video, and it'll be time incredibly well spent because they're an incredible organization, incredible team, incredible leader. Nick, is there anything else you'd like to bring up?
No, thank you for the opportunity. I think while this task may seem daunting, we should remember this is part of a great tradition in America of citizens reforming our democracy to meet the challenges of our time. 200 years ago, our election system looked much different than it did today, and it's because generations prior took this initiative. And so we can do that again today. In fact, we must do that again today if we hope to keep the republic for generations to come. So for those that are interested in learning more, I encourage you to grab a copy of The Primary Solution, buy one for a friend. Even proceeds are going to support this movement, and it's a great way to spread the word.
Nick, thank you. Thank you so much for your time again. I'm a huge fan of yours and your work. I'm definitely getting the book and encourage everybody in our City Biz audience to lean in. Look, being a citizen is not a spectator sport. Many of us have tried that, and it doesn't work. So there are opportunities to lean in. As Nick said, there's a lot of different kinds of areas where help is needed, whether it's civic education or bridging or electoral reform, but certainly Unite America would be at the top of anybody's list. So please look into that. Nick, thank you so much for your time and greatly appreciate it. I hope you get some skiing in before the end of the winter. He's out in Colorado, so there's great skiing out there.
Thanks for the opportunity and all you do.
Our pleasure. Thank you.